Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and welcome uh, to our CNA's Sharp Strategies Wellbeing. What is it? I'll start our session today off with a karakia. Whakataka hau ki te uru, whakataka hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, kia hi aki anei te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. Kia ora, my name is Patrick Davies. I'm Member Engagement for Community Networks Aotearoa. We're a peak body, an umbrella organisation of over 85 networking organisations around the Motu in the voluntary and social services sector. And you can find more about us by simply Googling Community Networks Aotearoa. Today, we'll be talking about well-being. We'll be recording this for later promotion on our YouTube channel, and please do feel free to put your mic off, pop questions in the chat, which I'll monitor as we go. Now, I do want to introduce our wonderful wahine today who will be discussing our topics. Tess Casey, she is the Executive Director of the New Zealand Association of Counsellors. Lisa Woods, who is the Campaign Director of Amnesty International New Zealand. And Liz Hawes, Kaitui Order of the Social Equity and Wellbeing Network in Christchurch. And I do have to say, just to say that all of these people have a connection with Community Networks Aotearoa. Tess and Liz are currently on our executive committee, and Lisa used to sit in this very seat. So today we're going to be looking at well-being and what's going on, not only for the well-being in our communities, with what's going on with local government, looking at well-placed well-being and looking at individual well-being. So Lisa, I'll come to you to kick us off. Local Government Minister Simon Watts is introducing a bill to remove the 4 well-being provisions from the Local Government Act to refocus councils on their core functions. The well-being provisions were removed by National in 2012 and then reintroduced by Labour in 2019. And they are social, economic, environmental, and cultural provisions. So, Lisa, what do you think of this impact it's going to have for our sector?
I was thinking about this, and I mean, my main concern is it's a narrowing of focus, right? And so the risk there being that we're not going to see the types of activities that communities need to be well. But ultimately, when I was really thinking about this is my concern here really is, this is quite a top-down approach and how this will undermine local democracy, because if you have a narrower focus on councils, this is my concern is going to stop councils being able to do what the community wants and what the community needs. And it was interesting, the minister made a statement, something to the effect of councils are spending far too much doing the things people do not consider core activities of a local government. But I don't necessarily agree that this is what most people want from a local government. And this tells me there's a more fundamental question here that needs to be answered. And you were just saying, we've had these well-beings put in, put out, put in, put out. So I think there's a fundamental question here about what do communities want and need from local government.
Tess, we'll come to you. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I'm kind of a little bit bemused by it too, because when councils have a role to make decisions on behalf of their communities and with the best interests of their communities at heart, how do you do that if you don't factor in social, economic, environmental, and cultural factors? It doesn't make sense. What's left? So I don't understand what it will mean in reality. And I think that, and there's a number of questions around the details about that. And top of mind would be, well, if they're not going to pay heed to those things and consequently not fund those things, who is going to pick up the slack? So central government doesn't seem to have noticed that this might land on them. And I think it's ignoring all the fundamental evidence that shows that things like health determinants and community safety are all impacted by a lack of social cohesion. So if you don't have those things in place, New Zealand becomes a less attractive place to live.
Mm.
That will be the long-term outcome if this is stuck to in a very strict sense. So yeah, I'm kind of bemused. I don't kind of get how it can work in practice.
Liz, of course, being in Christchurch, the value of community, especially the last 5 years, has been quite spectacular. What's your view on this?
The answer I have for the question is what's going to happen is it's going to rest on us and the community sector. I mean, that's going to put a lot more pressure on groups, and it's taking community out of policy. And I mean, all of the feedback we've had over all these awful disasters and times of struggle that we've had, including COVID, is the government, we went to a meeting with MSD and they talked about the power of the invisible groups, which they call invisible because they don't see them, but all of that work that's done in the community in terms of social cohesion, um, how's that going to work if there isn't the funding and the resource to do it? We'll still do it probably, but we'll do it on a shoestring as usual and put a lot more pressure on us as a sector, which really concerns me because in the end it's those groups with the connections and the relationships with the right at the grassroots that make all the difference in terms of social cohesion, I believe. Yeah.
There's very much a vacuum that's being sort of provided here by government. Do you think that local government really feels that this is a valuable way to go?
I think, well, particularly I think historically in Aotearoa, we've had a really strong relationship with council. I think, many years ago, I used to come up to national meetings and people would call us the People's Republic because I think we were one of the early, areas where council did provide funding for the community sector, and it was a really strong sector at that time. I mean, that's waned, changed over time, but currently it's quite strong again. It just really depends on who's in power as well in terms of the priorities that they place on. But I think we've had so much happen in this community that there's, I think, probably a pretty strong understanding of how important those organisations are to the social cohesion and resilience of a community.
Lisa, I was wondering, with these kind of stresses that our sector seems to be being hit quite hard from a number of sides. What effects are you seeing in your campaigns with Amnesty International?
Well, actually, one of the things that was brought up at a hui I was at just recently were the concerns of where you send people who are seeking support because so many agencies are just some are closing, or we're hearing from NGOs that are closing, others are just so spread so thinly and unable to provide the support to the growing numbers of people who need it. And when you think in a country like Aotearoa, that should not at all be the case. And I think, when I look at this policy, I see like a really another example of poor policy where you're not engaging or having the conversations with the people you need to talk with at the beginning about what the impact will be. So those questions and points that were just raised by Tess and Liz about who is going to pick this up and where is the role for community, they're really important things you need to have decided and worked through with those impacted before you do this type of policy. But what we're seeing is government just, push something through, I think, without having done the proper analysis behind it. And the result being, just as I think Liz said, is that you're going to see community carrying that burden and communities already under so much strain.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, we are already resource poor in that way. I wonder if this coalition government also seems to be fast tracking a lot of legislation to get things put through. And as Simeon Brown said, getting the councils back to their core ideas and issues, and putting this in the nice to have basket. for all three of you, what are the things that we might be able to do? How might we be able to push back against this?
I think for me, I think, and when I was thinking through the questions before this, I thought, gosh, my answers are going to be the same for everything. And I think it's something that Liz has alluded to as well. Collectivizing and working together is kind of the only way you get through things like this. And I think that the instinct when we're under pressure and feeling overwhelmed is to kind of hunker down and to look inside, and we've got fewer people doing the work. And so everybody's kind of overloaded. But in actual fact, we've got to do the complete opposite to what our instinct is telling us, and to look out and to connect and to make sure that the stories of the communities are being told and getting to the ears of people that need to know about them.
I completely agree with Tess, and I think you're absolutely right. It goes against because our nature is that we've got to go out there because there's so many things we need to work on in the community, and so that sense of connection and the power of collective action is really important, I think. And also to support each other in this time. That's one of the 5 well-beings. Ways to well-beings is connection and relationship, and how important that is for us to keep going in this mahi, even when we feel like the power above us or around us is not supporting us in that work. But I completely agree with Tess. We've just got to keep on going, but with each other, and to hold each other up. And I mean, there's things that can make that happen in terms of there's a whole ecosystem around the funding, that if we have less competitive funding models, and part of those models keep us apart from each other as well. So there's all sorts of structural ways that that could change with in terms of supporting us to work together more.
I completely agree with everything that's been said. That mobilisation is so critical at the moment, and this is a bill, so it's going to go to select committee, and hopefully there are good opportunities there for people to submit. So really keep an eye out for that. But really visit your local MP, write to the minister, ring the minister's office. Let them know that you're really concerned by this. One thing we know with all different governments is that people power can work, but it does take persistence and it does take mobilisation. And the other reason I think it's really important to be out there talking with decision makers and others around is to really keep the narrative, because I think what we're seeing here is a narrative that is trying to prioritise economic considerations over all of those other considerations. I think, as Tess said earlier, how can you not make a good decision without considering all of these different things? So even just bringing back that narrative to actually, this is about community and this is the most important thing and this is what matters, is really important.
I think that's a very valuable point. We are resource poor, but we do have a voice. And certainly CNA will be making sure that through our newsletter, which you can get on our website, information around the select committee times and how to make a submission to the select committee will be handling all that information out as well. I think we're all on the same page here in terms of really trying to focus our efforts into making our local MPs, our ministers, hear our voice, given that we are a very, very large sector that as of the 2018 census contributes 4.6% to GDP. We are an established huge sector, and I think we need to really stand up and show our weight behind that as well. I'd just like to move on to our second point, if I can. I was thinking about workplace well-being, and I just wondered if you would mind sharing within your organisations. Lisa, let's start with you, purely because you're on my screen at the moment. What are the ways in which your organisation helps workplace well-being?
I'm really lucky to work for an organisation and to have previously worked for a number of organisations such as CNA who really genuinely value wellbeing, and some of the things that we do in our organisation to really foster that. I mean, there's lots of different things, but I was thinking, well-being for me ultimately comes down to relationships, and I really appreciate that at Amnesty we really do try and foster those, and it's everything from having we have a meeting, a big team hui once a week, where we often start with what we call an icebreaker question, and it might be a silly question such as um, oh, it's not a silly question. What's your favourite ice cream? It's not silly. That's important. And so just but things to try and have a laugh with each other and deepen knowledge around each other and have those moments for team get-togethers. And because it's those relationships when everything else is falling down, right? There's the relationships around us that sustain us. And so being able to work in an organisation that understands that, values that, and walks the walk when it comes to kindness and compassion. And I think, those types of things are really important. And also having things, the nature of the work we do means that the organisation can support things such as flexi working, which helps people with different responsibilities and those types of policies. As well, like many people, I think a lot of the people, we're facing really horrific content a lot, and being able to have in place practices such as good debrief sessions, the opportunities to get professional support or supervision if needed, particularly when you're dealing with some quite serious matters. So those types of processes as well are really important.
Liz, can we come to you, please?
Yeah, I remember reading once around meetings, and I think I've talked about this before with CNA, is the importance of how many laughs you have in a meeting. So those sorts of values and policies, not that we have it as a formal one, but there's lots of laughter and fun because a lot of what we carry is really heavy. And I think, that's really important to be able to do that. That's one thing. The other thing that our organisation, because we really struggle financially and we don't have a lot, we can't have millions of pay increases and things. But so our board came up with the idea of a wellbeing payment once a year. So if we need something like a pair of glasses or massage or anything that we need that could, contribute towards our well-being, we've got this payment that we can access. So that was as a worker, I found that really positive. And we don't always use it, but it's really nice to know that it's there. And I think I agree that whole sort of personal connection and how important it is to start, all of our meetings, we start with that kind of personal, how are people, what's going on for them, and how important that is for the well-being, really. And I mean, doing things like the other thing I think about is, some weeks we have a lot of pressure and we work really hard, and other weeks things are a bit slower, and actually reminding ourselves that we don't have to work at that pace all the time. So sort of having that culture in the organisation where it's okay to actually go a bit slower this week, and that pacing, because I think that's really important because this work isn't always consistent in terms of timing. And so there's some of the things that I think are really helpful.
I agree. I love that idea of the well-being payment. That's a wonderful way to be able to provide without too much expenditure, but also in terms of ensuring the well-being of your soul as well. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that idea of the wellbeing payment too. I think that's great. But I think the other thing I really pick up on, what Liz and Lisa have both sort of said about, we are not a sector where we can keep providing well-being through things that cost money or looking after well-being. So we have to be just a little bit more creative, I think, and I think we're good at being creative. One of the things that I know that, our team really appreciates is flexibility. So as well as all those, the checking in, with people, the relationships are obviously the critical and most important thing. But I think if you can, we we have the ability, particularly in our teams, is to offer some sort of flexibility, and a lot of that is through part-time hours. So, not insisting that people do a 40-hour week if a 40-hour week isn't kind of the thing that works for them. There's ways to think about having fewer hours and still getting the work done, and the way that we can share kind of the workload. And I think, just getting a little bit a bit creative about how we sort of do the work itself, can sometimes provide people with well-being, but also a real sense of satisfaction in terms of what they're doing. I think there's research, I can't remember where it was, that actually what motivates most people in their work is a sense that they're doing a good job. And so, that feedback loops and stopping and celebrating when you've got through something gnarly and it's all gone okay, or even if it hasn't gone okay, just stopping and sort of saying, we did that, we got through that before you move on to the next thing. And I know I am terribly guilty at that. Before the thing is even finished, I've moved on to my head into the next thing. And you've just got to kind of sometimes just stop and pause and go, okay, no, we did that, and we are going to acknowledge that before we kind of keep moving on. And just little things, going for a walk, when you're having your staff meeting, instead of staying in the office, or if you need to have a chat with someone, do it while you're outside having a walk, or, doing the stuff quiz at morning tea time. They're all little things that really contribute to just a team feeling, in a sense that people are in this together. And I think that's really important.
That sounds fantastic. I will, as well, at CNA here, we always start with the quiz first thing in the morning. Sometimes we average around about 12 or 13, so we're very happy with that. Although I will skite and say yesterday we did manage 15 out of 15. But that's also part and parcel of what CNA is about as well, in the sense that this is a really fun office. This is a really good office that we can talk to each other about what's happening outside. We do take time to sit down every now and then, but also I'll talk everything that's just been said, in terms of we can sometimes find ourselves going, what's next? What's next? What's next? Because the work is unending. I love that when someone said, the object of every charity is not to be needed anymore. And it does feel like it does go on and on and on sometimes, but also you're quite right. Those relationships of those around you helping to work towards the greater good can be a really empowering thing. And I'd like to sort of touch a little bit more on that. Tess, you were talking about going for walks, and I love the idea of a walking meeting. That would be, I want to have a go at that. I'm not sure if Roz would be up for that. She might go, absolutely. She might not. We'll see how it goes. It depends what the weather is like, really. Oh, got the thumbs up. So we're going to have a go at that, I think. But also, what are the sort of things that you do personally? Because I find that we'll see something in a newsletter, we'll see something online, and it says, remember to stop for a moment, remember to roll your shoulders. Are there any tricks that you could honestly say that any of you three do, just to take care of your own well-being?
I feel like I'm a really bad person to ask some of this stuff to, because I talk a good game, but I don't necessarily follow through on myself. So yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. And I also have to preface, I'm the executive director of the New Zealand Association of Counsellors, but I am not a counsellor myself. So I'm just a civilian. Please don't take anything I say as mental health advice. I think with the self-care stuff, you've got to be really authentic, and you've got to know what works for you individually. But because there's a lot of talk about self-care and all the things that work and don't work for people, and it's become quite an industry. But in actual fact, you've kind of got to think, okay, what is it in a day that I need to make sure I do to make sure I'm okay? And for me personally, I'm a writer, so I need some writing time in my day. That's what makes me tick. I need to walk, and I need preferably, somewhere in nature. even if it's just a walk down to the beach before I go to work every morning. Um, and I think, yeah, so it's just those little things. They're what works for me, but they might not work for anybody else. And so I think it's just noticing those things that and tuning into those things that actually are meaningful for you as a person to help you get through the day.
It's awesome.
I think, you know, and I know we all know it and we've seen them 1,000 times, but the 5 ways to well-being, they're really simple, but I think I found that really useful for me at times when I've been stressed, just to go back and look at those and think, okay, what have have I covered these today or this week? Or to remind myself, because I think we can get really complicated, like Tess said, and it's just to come back to yourself and think, what do I need in this moment? And these are some hints to remind me of what is good for my mental health and what will help me through that. So that's, yeah, and it depends, doesn't it, on what's going on. And sometimes it's to talk to people, sometimes it's to go and stand with a tree. So it depends on, where you're at in terms of what's stressing you or what is challenging in that moment. What about you,
Yeah.
Lisa.
I was actually at a hui a couple of weeks ago where this question was asked, and I think I talked about it earlier, Fatty, when we were catching up. So I'll just take everyone else's ideas. But there were some really good ideas, things that people talked about that worked for them. Things like asking yourself, is this going to matter in a month? And if it is, then okay, maybe, yeah. But touching nature, so whether or not that's going out and feeling something, putting your feet on the ground. People talked about things like if you're around the ocean, just be able to stare out at an ocean or mountains, or at night up into the stars. People talked about how that gave them a feeling of release, just seeing sort of the expanse really out there, listening to music. And I was thinking, oh, all of these ideas are so good. And I actually just have to be intentional, because I think I very easily fall into that trap of I've got 15 minutes and I'm on my phone doing that doom scrolling, which just becomes, we know it is addictive. And I know very well it does not work for well-being. So what I'm always having to challenge myself is in those moments to use them intentionally for something that can bring a little bit of peace in what is a very busy time. I think I was just actually reflecting just on the previous question as well about how we can keep ourselves well in organisations or social movements or whatever groupings we might be working in. And I think, a lot of the bigger issues we're working on are really long term, right? So the win isn't in a week's time. It could be years, it could be decades. And I think the importance of us being able to create spaces for people in different movements, different groups, different organisations to come together and support each other, and knowing that there have been times when we've been working in a collaboration where an organisation's said we've got to step down because of things going on, and others have been like, okay, fine, well, all good, we'll pick this up and carry on, so you can have that time to do what you need to do. So it's sort of relationships the whole way through, from at that level, people to people, organisation to organisation, and all the people within it.
And it's the classic, put on your oxygen mask, isn't it? Like, we're working with people often that need, that are really struggling and need support. But if we're not feeding ourselves and looking after ourselves, we're not. I always remember doing a training many, many, many years ago, and the trainer talked about the fact that we can't take people beyond where we're at. So if we haven't done the work, or we're not in a good place, we can't move people further on than that. So we create that limit for them if we're not, looking after ourselves and modeling that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had a presentation at something last week. One of our members had done a PhD on self-care, and what she found was that a lot of people have, particularly, I think it's particularly true in our sector, have a real cringe about self-care because we think it's selfish. We think that if we stop um, and we take a moment for ourselves, that we're somehow abdicating our responsibility, or we're being, we're not looking after people, that we've constantly got to be, on and helping and looking after everybody else. And the other thing she said that was really interesting is that it's just the term self-care is foreign to some of us, and that kind of it needs to be reframed, and particularly from a cultural perspective where it's very individually focused, and for a lot of us we don't think that way, and a lot of our communities don't think that way. They take a more collective response to how they think about things, and I think that's actually really important because it means that it becomes everybody's responsibility around self-care, that you're noticing people and you're noticing what's going on for people. So if you've noticed that, one of your staff members hasn't stood up and they've been plugged into their laptop for 5 hours without a break because they're frantically trying to go and finish something, tell them, go and say, can I get your water? Come for a walk with me. Just taking that collective responsibility so that we're all okay, I think is I really like that. I like the way that she framed that and put that out there, that kind of, it feels a little bit more feasible than journaling frantically and lighting a scented candle every night. It feels a bit more meaningful.
I'm definitely a walker. Every lunchtime I have to go for a walk because it's just me. I walk everywhere in the world, and if I don't move my body, it will hurt me. And I just want to point out, thank you, Patipoa from DPA has put in a link to the Wellbeing Hub, a guide to connecting with nature, in the chat if you want to click on that while we continue our conversation. And I will note that every so often, perhaps once a year, CNA invites all the people on our same level to a dancing in the corridor party as a way just to break up the end of the day and to go, yeah, life should be fun sometimes. And it's one of those weird things where you go, I'm at the office and I'm dancing, but it feels amazing, and it just feels like you're getting a breath of fresh air into your brain. We do have a question coming in that's actually for you, Liz. Yes. Could you just talk to a bit about how did you look after yourself and your team, and also the victims following the mosque shootings, and how that went for you?
Well, my team at the time was me and a part-time administrator. So the way I dealt with it, and full disclosure, I was quite connected with the community, the Muslim community. My sons normally attended the mosque, but didn't that day. So it was very close to home for me personally. And so what I did was, how I responded was, and how my board really supported me with, was just spent time after the shootings. There was the council set up a space for people to go to, and where resources were bought, food and clothing and nappies and all sorts of things. So I just went and spent time there. Then there was another resource set up in a community that I was involved in. So I just got to work and supported that mahi. And there was a particular woman in a leadership role there that I supported her and connected her in with a local Māori organisation, which has been a really fruitful relationship. And then I got involved in another project. So for me, the thing was the getting involved and seeing and just watching and seeing where's a space that I could move and I could be supportive. I helped raise some money. We helped raise just, informally some money towards supporting families who were coming from overseas. So we just did what we could, and that was a really empowering, that sense of being able to do something, because I think that's the worst thing in a situation like that, is that sense of powerlessness. And, I'm still involved with a project which we've umbrellaed that came out of the mosque shootings, which is called In Common, and Share Kai, which we're still really involved with to this day, really. So it's kind of produced, and a lot of resource came into the ethnic community space in Aotearoa. So there's been lots of involvement and work in that space since that time. So that's what got me through was that sense of, being able to get on the ground and do something. Yeah. So that's personally how we, because I think it's the powerlessness that's the worst feeling, really, is when you can't, there's nothing that you can do. Yeah. So that's part of.
Kia ora, Liz. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much. Well, I'm just going to move us on to a question that has been sent in, and this is for everybody. And I think we've touched on it definitely. I'll just read it in full. Whose role is it to look after the community leaders? And I mean this in the broadest sense, as we face a harsher funding climate, greater need, less support from central and local government, and no particular end in sight. And I think we're talking about that kind of thing about the leaders being supported through what they need to do.
I think this is, ultimately everyone's responsibility, but I think particularly for leaders, depending on the nature of the organisation. So, if you've got a board, then the board has been really, I think, sort of aware of that. I know leaders of organisations often talk, it can be a hard role. Some people talk about it being a lonely role. And so having, boards that are really aware of that and people around them wrapping around support. But it does also make me think, because we have leaders all throughout this amazing community, like of organisations, leaders in so many different groups and so many different scenarios. But it does make me think the importance of sort of working so we really can have each other's backs, so that when there might be a leader in a certain group or a certain movement or a certain issue that might need to step back, that there are others around them who can step up while they need that time or support them in different ways. So really all working, really reaching out across movement, across groups to see where we can support each other over the longer term.
Yeah, and that kind of, again, I think it comes back to, whose role is it? Well, I think it's everybody's role, really. I think there's no cavalry out there that's coming to rescue us. We have to kind of take responsibility for this stuff ourselves and to look after our leaders and to support them to look after themselves. And it kind of reminded me actually of something that we used to do years ago in an organisation that I was part of, and we had these things called, because it was a membership network, and I think that's the other thing that I just wanted to say about this is this networks are vital in this space. That's, organisations like CNA and other networks where we bring people together and support and can talk together about issues and opportunities and ideas, I think is really vitally important. But what we used to do with this organisation, we had these things called blood and fire meetings, and they were small kind of networks for, 4 or 5 people, colleagues that work closely together. They happened about once every month. And the only reason that you couldn't go was because you were bleeding or there was something on fire. And it was to prioritize talking together. So, and they were basically mainly for people in leadership. So we extended them out through other parts of the organization as well. And it just meant that, you were able to build that network of colleagues that you could talk to. There was no agenda. It was just a purely get together and talk about what you need to talk about on that day. And and I'm glad I remembered that because they were really good, and I think we could start them again.
I love the name of them, Tess. Because that's something I often say to people too when they're getting stressed about something, and I say, is someone going to die? Like, how important is this really? In this moment. And we also got involved with a group set up in Christchurch called Lone Wolves, which I thought was another cool name. And it was basically people who were working on their own, and the same sort of thing, a really informal peer support where there wasn't an